The room smelled like overbrewed coffee and perfume that had long since turned sour. I sat near the window, second to last chair on the left. Not out of shyness, just habit. I had always gravitated toward corners where I could see everything and everyone without being in the way. Or maybe it was because someone else always claimed the center, and I had learned to let them. The long oak table was filled with familiar faces, some lined with grief, others animated with tension. My older brother Todd cleared his throat as if that gave him authority. My sister Janine sat beside him, flipping through a packet of papers like she was already calculating square footage and resale value. "I'm just saying," Todd said, looking toward the lawyer but loud enough for the whole room to hear. Dad would have wanted it fair. Not sentimental. Sentimental. That was their word for me. For the years I spent here when they were off raising families and climbing ladders. They said I stayed too long, gave up too much, clung to Dad like a crutch. As if helping him bathe or holding his hand through chemo was something weak. Something less than noble. The lawyer, Mr. Kessler, looked down through his bifocals. "We'll get to the reading shortly, but let's give it a moment. It's only been 3 days since the funeral. 3 days." And already they had gathered like vultures circling memory. I watched Janine nudge Todd and whisper, "Do you think she even knows what's in the will?" I pretended not to hear. But I always heard. That's the thing about being the invisible one, you catch everything. The chair beside me remained empty. It was the one Dad always sat in when we had Sunday pot roast or watched Jeopardy reruns after dinner. I used to joke that it held his shape. No one sat there now. Maybe they thought it would make them look too soft. Funny how silence can scream louder than any argument. "I just don't want this to get messy," Janine finally said. Her tone was syrupy sweet, but her words dripped with control. "We all loved him. We should respect what he left behind." I folded my hands in my lap, still as stone. Respect. Where was that when he needed rides to appointments or someone to cook low-sodium meals? When he cried after forgetting Mom's name for the 3rd time that week? When he fell in the kitchen and I had to lift his fragile frame while they were on vacation? Todd's voice cut through the haze. "Look, Marla's here too. She can hear this. We just want what's fair. Fair." That word again. I looked up then, not angry, just tired. My eyes met his, and for a split second, I thought I saw guilt. But it passed quickly, like a cloud across the sun. Mr. Kessler finally opened the envelope. The room stilled. But all I could think about was how empty that chair looked without Dad in it, and how somehow I was still the one who felt like I didn't belong. It didn't start with Dad's illness. It started long before that, with quiet birthdays and unanswered calls, with being the one who always showed up while everyone else made excuses. I was 39 when the diagnosis came. Alzheimer's, early onset. Dad was 71, still sharp enough to know what it meant, but scared enough to pretend it didn't. The others, Todd, Janine, even my youngest sister Emily, talked logistics, like it was a weekend project. "We'll rotate weekends," Todd had suggested, as if caregiving was a casserole you could drop off once a month. But when the first weekend came and no one showed up, it was me who stayed. I moved back into the house, the one we all grew up in. My lease had been up anyway, and freelance graphic design wasn't exactly stable. I told myself it was temporary, just until we found a good facility, just until things got worse. They got worse fast. Dad stopped recognizing the microwave, then forgot how to tie his shoes, then my name, and still no one came. Janine sent money for a few months. Emily forwarded articles about coping with dementia. Todd called twice. That was the sum total of their involvement. But I stayed. I learned to administer meds, to reorient him with old photo albums, to stop him gently when he tried to leave the house at midnight to go to work. I sang to him during sundowning spells, played Sinatra on loop, and sat beside him when he forgot where he was, and cried like a child. I stopped dating, stopped taking new clients. I lost a tooth and didn't go to the dentist for 2 months because I couldn't leave him alone. My world shrank to the square footage of our childhood home and the quiet routines of keeping someone safe. When I tried to talk to the family, they brushed me off. "You're choosing this," Janine once said. "No one asked you to be a martyr." I didn't answer. What could I say? That I didn't do it for them. That I did it because love, real love, doesn't check the calendar or the cost. Dad had good days too. He'd call me kiddo and thank me for cooking, even when I just reheated soup. He once squeezed my hand and whispered, "You're my lighthouse, Marla." I cried in the bathroom after that. Not because it hurt, but because for a moment he remembered. And yet to them, I was still the one who had no life. They saw me as the failure, the one who never married, never had kids, never moved up or out. In their eyes, I was the soft one, the one who lingered too long, but I knew the truth. I had stayed, not because I had nowhere else to go, but because no one else had the strength to stay. I didn't need recognition. I didn't expect thanks, but I had thought, maybe they'd see that when it was all over, someone would say she gave up so much. Instead, they gathered with their polished grief and whispered, I hadn't earned anything. They didn't know. They never really knew me at all. The mahogany-paneled conference room smelled like old paper and lemon polish. I sat on the far side of the table, next to a dusty ficus that hadn't been watered in weeks. It felt symbolic somehow, something once living left to survive in the corner. Mr. Kessler, Dad's longtime attorney, adjusted his glasses and looked around the table. "Thank you all for being here," he said. "Your father's wishes were clear and legally binding. Please allow me to read his statement in full before asking questions." Janine nodded, her face tight with expectation. Todd leaned back, fingers steepled. Emily was scrolling through her phone under the table, occasionally nodding without looking up. Me, I stared at the folder in Mr. Kessler's hands like it might catch fire. He cleared his throat and began. "To my children, whom I have loved in different ways and at different times." That line alone made me clench my hands in my lap. In different ways. In different times. I wasn't sure if it was poetic honesty or polite detachment. I leave the family lake house to Janine, for she always dreamed of water views. Janine smiled victorious. She had already posted Pinterest boards of renovations she'd never done. To Todd, I leave my shares in Hanley & Sons and the remainder of my business assets. Todd nodded like a man accepting a promotion. To Emily, I leave the vintage record collection, my rare coin set, and my blessing for her continued travels. Emily looked up for half a second. Cool. I waited. The pause before my name was too long. And to Marla, Mr. Kessler continued. I leave my heartfelt gratitude for her constant presence and care in my final years. Her loyalty has meant more to me than words can express. I blinked. That was it. No property, no accounts, no heirlooms, just words. I heard Janine exhale, whether in relief or triumph, I couldn't tell. Todd coughed lightly, avoiding eye contact. Emily muttered something about Thai food. My throat tightened, but I didn't let it show. Mr. Kessler looked at me with something that resembled sympathy. Your father did speak often of your support, he said quietly. He wrote this himself. I nodded, lips pressed together. A thank you. That's what I was worth. Not even a piece of furniture. For 5 years, I gave up everything. I cleaned his wounds, washed his clothes, comforted his fears. I watched him disappear piece by piece, and I stood vigil. And now, all I had to show for it was a line in a will that could have been pulled from a greeting card. Janine began discussing logistics, already calling the lake house her summer spot. Todd asked when the transfer documents would be ready. Emily left early, saying she had a flight to catch, and I sat there numb. I thought of the hallway where I had caught Dad once trying to open the linen closet with a car key. Of the morning he asked me if I was his sister. Of the last night when he called me by Mom's name and said, "You always come back for me." And now, nothing. I stood slowly, pushed in my chair. Let them keep their lake views and business shares. I had memories they'd never want, and a hollowness they'd never understand. A week after the reading, the house was silent in a way that hurt. Not the stillness of peace, but of abandonment. I had stayed behind while they all scattered like birds, startled by the final closing of a door. I had nowhere else to go, and maybe for now that was a mercy. The kitchen clock still ticked in uneven rhythms the way it always had. The living room smelled faintly of Old Spice and the mustiness of worn leather. I found myself wiping down doorknobs and rearranging framed photos as if they might suddenly speak to me. Grief is strange. It doesn't always come in waves. Sometimes it settles like dust, quiet, inevitable, suffocating. I decided to clean out Dad's study. It was the one room I had left untouched since his death, still lined with legal pads, pens that had run dry, and newspaper clippings he kept even when he couldn't remember why. A few bills were stacked on the desk. The top drawer stuck as it always had, so I tugged hard and finally got it open. That's when I found it. A manila envelope, thick, unmarked, no name, no label. I knew Dad's handwriting, and this wasn't it. I opened it anyway, expecting old tax documents, or maybe a forgotten birthday card. What I found made my knees go weak. A notarized deed transfer. The house this house signed over to me. Effective immediately. Dated 7 months before he passed. My name. My name alone. There was also a letter, not typed, not even written with his usual blocky print. It was scrawled shaky, unsure, but unmistakably his. Marla, if you're reading this, it means they left you out. I knew they would. I couldn't say it out loud, too much noise when I tried. They wouldn't have believed me, or worse, they'd say I was confused. You were never less. You were the one who stayed. The house is yours. You kept it standing, kept me standing. I didn't forget. Dad. I sat down hard on the edge of the desk letter, trembling in my hand. He had known. All those moments when I thought he was gone, he had still seen me. Remembered me. Not with clarity maybe, but with love. And he had acted. He left me nothing in the will, because he'd already given me everything he could in secret. It wasn't just about the house. It was about the knowing, the being seen. My siblings hadn't seen me, but Dad had. Suddenly, the kitchen tiles beneath my feet felt different. The air warmer. The house didn't feel like a museum anymore. It felt like home. My home. I carefully returned the letter to the envelope and slid it into my own file folder. There would be fallout. I knew that. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready for it. Let them come. Let them ask how I ended up with the house. I wouldn't shout. I wouldn't gloat. I'd just show them the paper. And if they still didn't understand, that was on them. The first thing I did was remove the brass nameplate from the mailbox. It had read the Whitmans for over 30 years. It had dulled with time, the edges tarnished, one screw rusted to the point of snapping. I dropped it into a box with other pieces of the past, Dad's tie clips, old house keys with faded tags, a photograph of the 5 of us from when we still pretended to be close. Then I painted the mailbox navy blue. It was a small thing, but it was mine. The house needed work. Years of deferred maintenance had taken its toll. The porch sagged on one side. The gutters overflowed with leaves from summers long gone. The paint peeled like sunburned skin. I didn't hire contractors. I couldn't afford to. Instead, I rolled up my sleeves and did what I'd always done, handled things myself. I sanded the wood railings, patched drywall, replaced cracked tiles in the upstairs bathroom. Every task brought a strange sense of calm, a rhythm. My hands, once stiff from years of typing and caretaking, remembered how to build again. I converted the den into a sunroom, added cushions, low shelves, and a dozen plants that reached toward the light, like they knew they belonged. It became my sanctuary. But I wasn't just fixing the house. I was building something for me. 2 months later, I opened the front door to a small sign that read, "Nothing but peace. Herbal teas and quiet company, no fanfare. No grand opening, just me, a kettle, and a handful of folding chairs near the bay window." At first, it was just neighbors. Then friends of friends. Then strangers who had heard about that woman with the calming voice and the cinnamon lavender tea. They didn't know my story. I didn't offer it. People came to sit in silence, to sip, to read, to think. I didn't have Wi-Fi. That was the point. Sometimes someone would ask about the name. "Why, nothing but peace," they'd say. And I'd smile, stir honey into their mug, and reply, "Because that's all I wanted." All I gave. I didn't mention the siblings, the will, the things taken or never offered. They had made their choices, so had I. I sent no letters. I returned no calls. When Todd emailed weeks later asking if I'd found somewhere to land, I replied, "I'm home." Janine texted once to ask if I knew a good real estate lawyer. I never answered. Emily sent a Christmas card that said, "Hope you're well," with a photo of her in Peru. I tossed it into the recycling bin without opening it. My quiet exit wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming the space they never thought I deserved. About proving to myself, most of all, that I didn't need their validation. Just a little piece. And maybe, just maybe, a place that smelled like rosemary and clove instead of resentment. It started with a whisper. Mrs. Halloran from 2 doors down came in for a cup of mint chamomile one rainy Thursday. She sat by the window, knitting something striped and soft, and asked, "Is it true you live here alone now?" I nodded. "Good," she said simply. "That house always suited you better than the others." The next week, Mr. Phillips, who hadn't spoken to me since we were kids, dropped by. He didn't even order tea, just stood in the doorway, took off his cap, and said, "I heard you stayed." Brave thing staying when the others scattered like marbles on a tile floor. I didn't correct him. I didn't need to. Then came the questions. Curious ones, kind ones. From people who remembered the old days, who recalled seeing me push Dad's wheelchair up the street or shovel snow from his ramp while the rest of the block still slept. They asked quietly, in that way people do when they're not sure if they're intruding. "Was it hard what you did? Why didn't they help? Did he really leave you nothing?" I gave them the same answer every time. A smile, a shrug. He gave me what mattered. And somehow that answer spread faster than the truth ever could. Soon people came, not just for tea, but for the story. The woman who stayed. The daughter who didn't fight, but didn't disappear either. It became lore half-whispers shared over biscotti and Earl Grey. And the more they talked, the more my siblings started to listen. I got the first call from Todd on a Tuesday. "Hey, just checking in," he said, voice tight with forced cheer. "Heard you were still in the house." "I am," I replied. Pause. Then, didn't expect that. I didn't say anything. Let the silence thicken, like soup left too long on the stove. Janine emailed next. Subject line, "We should talk." No greeting. No pleasantries. Just, "I think some of the neighbors are confused about how things were settled. We should clarify a few things, for everyone's sake." I deleted it. Then Emily posted a vague story on social media, a photo of the lake house captioned, "Some people take what's not theirs, but karma always catches up." She didn't tag me. She didn't have to. People started choosing sides. But I didn't ask them to. Some defended Janine and Todd, insisting that inheritance should be about fairness, not feelings. Others spoke up for me, sharing their own stories of being the forgotten child, the invisible one. The noise grew louder. But in my home, it was quiet. The tea still steeped at 195 degrees. The floorboards still creaked near the stairs. The sunlight still caught the windows just right around 10 a.m., casting gold onto the hardwood like a benediction. One Saturday, I opened the door to find a stranger standing there. Young, maybe early 20s. Nervous smile. "Are you the woman who owns this place?" Now I nodded. He reached into his backpack and handed me a small envelope. "My mom told me what you did for your dad. Said it reminded her of her sister. She made this for you." Inside was a tiny stitched square that read, "Strength doesn't shout. It shows up." I hung it in the sunroom. The gossip had begun. But so had something else. Respect. Not the kind written in wills or measured in bank accounts. The kind earned day by quiet day. It wasn't supposed to go viral. The blog post was meant to be a reflection, a quiet story shared by one of my regulars, Lila Jennings, a retired journalist who now wrote about unsung women in her spare time. She came in every Tuesday, ordered rooibos with oat milk, and scribbled in a notebook with a lavender pen. She liked the silence, she said it helped her think. Then one day, she asked if she could write about me. "I won't use names," she promised. "But your story, it matters." I shrugged. "If you think someone needs to hear it, sure." I didn't expect it to land on the homepage of Medium by Friday. The Quiet Daughter Who Stayed a Story of Love, Care and the Cost of Being Forgotten. It had over 10,000 views by sunset. Comments flooded in, my sister took everything when Dad passed. I was the one who bathed him every night. This is why I always say, don't judge who's present at the funeral. Judge who was there before it. She didn't get nothing, she got the truth, and she turned it into peace. It didn't take long before local papers picked it up. Then a podcast host reached out. Then someone sent me a link to a Facebook group where people were sharing the article like gospel. And with every share, every like, every comment of support, my siblings panicked a little more. Todd emailed again. Marla, this is getting out of hand. People are contacting me. My coworkers saw it. You need to set the record straight. Janine left a voicemail tight and sharp. This portrayal of you as some kind of saint is misleading. You didn't tell people about the choices you made, about how we supported Dad from afar. Emily posted a video on her travel page, her eyes, red voice trembling, claiming the story had been twisted and exaggerated for clicks. But even her followers started asking uncomfortable questions in the comments. No one had expected me to become visible. Certainly not them. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The world was already doing the talking. One morning, I found a bouquet on the steps. No note. Just tulips and a ribbon. Another day, a former classmate stopped by and said I read that piece. I remember you used to help the lunch lady clean trays when everyone else ran off to recess. Some people are just built different. I didn't know what to say to that. At first, the attention overwhelmed me, but then I realized this wasn't about fame or vindication. It was about acknowledgement. Not just for me, but for every overlooked person who stayed behind when others left. People began booking the sunroom for quiet conversations. Women brought their mothers. A man came with his teenage daughter and told her, "This is the kind of woman you grow up to be." I hadn't asked for a movement. But I understood now, truth when shared without bitterness had power. One afternoon, as I wiped down the counter, the doorbell rang. It was Janine, dressed sharp as always, eyes hidden behind sunglasses despite the overcast sky. She didn't say hello, just Dad wouldn't have wanted this circus. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said quietly, "Dad wouldn't have wanted a lot of things." She didn't reply. She turned and walked away. I didn't follow. Let the world think what it wanted. For once, it wasn't built on their version. It was built on mine. The envelope came on a Tuesday. Thick cream cardstock, her signature loopy script across the front, Marla Whitman. No return address. But I knew the handwriting. Janine always wrote like she was applying for a job, every letter an audition. Inside was an invitation. You are cordially invited to a private family gathering in remembrance of our mother's passing 5 years ago this spring. Hosted by Janine Whitman at her home. Saturday, 8 p.m. Light refreshments will be served. No mention of Dad. No acknowledgement of the last year. No apology. I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded it in half, tucked it into my book, and decided I would go. Not to reconnect, not to forgive. Just to be there. Saturday arrived gray and humid. I wore navy linen, loose and soft. Comfortable, real. No makeup. My hair tied back the way Dad liked away from my face, so people can see your kindness right away. Janine's home was polished to perfection. White shutters, fresh mulch. The smell of lemon cleaner so sharp it made my eyes water. Emily greeted me first. "You came," she said, surprised. Her dress was coral. Her necklace shimmered. Her eyes darted, checking, calculating. Todd hovered near the bar, already holding a drink, already looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. He raised a glass toward me and gave a short nod. I returned it with the same energy. Janine swept in with a plate of crackers, and Brie, all grace and false warmth. "Marla," she said, kissing the air beside my cheek. "I wasn't sure you'd feel comfortable." "I'm fine," I said, letting the words land like a brick in a bowl of soup. There were cousins, old neighbors, people I hadn't seen in years. I noticed the subtle hush that followed me from room to room. Not hostility, not curiosity either. Something more like hesitation, like they'd read the article, seen the shares, and didn't quite know where to place me anymore. Good. I found an empty chair in the sunroom, fitting I thought, and sat quietly. Observing, listening. The stories began. Everyone shared something about Mom. Her laugh, her baking, her tendency to correct people's grammar mid-sentence. Then Janine stood. She cleared her throat a little too dramatically. I just want to say, she began, that family is complicated, but it's also permanent. You don't get to undo it just because it gets messy. There were nods, the kind that come when people feel they should agree, even if they don't know why. She looked at me. I didn't blink. Then, from the far side of the room, a small voice piped up. It was Lily Emily's daughter, 9 years old, all knees and curiosity. She turned toward me and asked, clear as a bell, Aunt Marla, why did they say you didn't get anything when Grandpa died? The room froze. Every adult held their breath. I smiled gently and said, because sometimes people don't see what someone gives until after it's gone. She thought about that. But you helped him, right? I did. Then you got something. You got to be the one who stayed. And just like that, the air shifted. No one clapped. No one spoke. But I saw it in their posture, in their eyes. Recognition. Even if they couldn't say it. Even if it came too late. I didn't stay long after the gathering. No one asked me to. No one asked me to leave either. But the air had thickened, like everyone was holding their breath around me. And honestly, I'd learned to recognize when my presence became too loud, even without a word. As I walked out, Lily followed me to the porch. She hugged me without asking. I felt her small arms wrap around my waist, a quick squeeze, no agenda behind it. I liked your answer, she said. About staying. I smiled. Thanks, sweetheart. I think I want to stay for people someday too. And just like that, something good passed forward. I left with no goodbyes. No dramatic exits. Just silence and my car key between my fingers. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the house felt warmer than it had in weeks. The lavender by the porch bloomed defiantly. The wind chimes sang a low note I hadn't heard before. It was the sound of stillness finding its center. Inside, the kettle clicked off. I made myself a cup of lemon balm tea and settled into the sunroom, where afternoon light poured in like honey. The letter from Dad was still in its envelope, tucked inside a drawer I rarely opened. I didn't need to see the words anymore. I knew them by heart. You were never less. You were the one who stayed. That was enough. Later that evening, I sat with my journal and tried to write about what the past year had meant. I started and stopped, scratched out whole paragraphs. Then I wrote a single line. They said I didn't deserve anything, so I gave them nothing in return. Not out of cruelty, not out of spite, but because the peace I'd built was not theirs to take and not mine to trade. I hadn't written back to Janine. I hadn't confronted Todd. I hadn't asked Emily why she filmed that teary video or what she really meant by twisted truths. Because what would have been the point? They had made their choices. I had made mine. And somewhere along the way, I stopped needing their understanding. Stopped waiting for their apology. Stopped hoping they'd one day say we were wrong. The house was quiet that night, but not empty. It held laughter from customers who stayed too long on rainy afternoons. It held stories from strangers who came looking for calm and found companionship. It held the ghost of my father's hand on my shoulder, steady and proud. And it held me, whole, unclaimed, undiminished. When the wind rose through the trees out front, I didn't feel small anymore. I felt rooted. Later, as I closed up the shop for the night, I noticed a new review on the website. Come for the tea, stay for the silence. You'll find more than peace you might find yourself. No name attached. But I knew who wrote it. Some truths don't need signatures. They just need to be lived. And I was done giving away my story to people who only knew how to take,